That was awesome. I'm really excited about that. That was really cool. I got the shot. The moon is one of my favorite things to photograph, and it's something that I've been enamored with my entire life. It's more than just a photographic subject for me, and I feel like it's a beautiful reminder to constantly look up. Hey, my name is Autumn Schrock. You might know me around the web as Pops. I'm so excited to be here in Grand Teton National Park to talk all things moon photography with you. I'm a professional astro, landscape, and travel photographer and member of the Sony Alpha Imaging Collective. If you're not familiar with my work, I have an ongoing project called Happy Moon Day, where I take photos and I post photos of the moon on my social media platforms with the caption Happy Moon Day, and wishing everyone a great week, a great day, maybe a great month, just sort of trying to bring some of that shining light into people's lives, because we all get those Monday blues sometimes, right? Of course, now it's raining. Perfect. There are so many different ways that you can photograph the moon. You can use a star tracker to take some long exposures. You can use a telescope or a super telephoto to get right on in it and get it, like a portrait of the moon. But the type of photography that I'm most interested with the moon is environmental portraits, where you sort of see the moon interacting with Earth. And I think that it can be really playful, and I think it's an easier way to tell a story with your photos and the moon. What I especially love about photographing the moon is that this one single object can appear to be various different objects depending on the time of month. So we've got all these different phases, and each phase has its own unique association. So a crescent moon might hold different emotions from a full moon. Like when you think of a crescent moon, it's a little bit more delicate. Maybe it can bring a little bit more emotion into your photos, whereas a full moon is a little bit more powerful and assertive, maybe a little more imposing. So it can match well with maybe like a tall, strong-looking mountain, and maybe a crescent moon more with like water, things that are more fluid and flowy. So using these different phases is a really great way to step up your storytelling and to really bring in more emotion into your photos. What can take this a step further is the time of day when you photograph the moon. So twilight, right before sunrise, right after sunset, when you get those kind of blues and purple hues, that can definitely bring in a more relaxed tone, a more delicate tone that can match well with those crescent moons. Whereas maybe right after sunrise, or maybe right before sunset, when there's this beautiful golden light and you have a moon off in the distance, that can bring more of a happy, cheerful, playful feel to your photos. When it comes to photographing the moon over landscape, I think it's a common misconception that it's either a single shot or a completely fabricated composite. But a lot of times you can blend exposures. So sometimes the moon's reflected light from the sun can be quite bright, and you'll need to take a separate exposure for that and a different exposure for your foreground. Often I'm shooting around that more twilighty, like sunrisey time of day. So I often find that I do blend exposures, where I'll take a brighter exposure for the foreground and then a darker exposure for the moon, and then blend those together later in Photoshop. Another thing with moon photography is, of course, you need a clear sky. You need to be able to see the moon. Sometimes you can make all these plans, maybe to photograph a lunar eclipse or, the supermoon, things like that. But sometimes things don't go according to plan, and that's okay. I think it's important to be able to improvise. For example, when I was trying to photograph the lunar eclipse, I think it was in 2021, I had all of these plans. I used the app PhotoPills to line it up over a mountain, and I was so excited. And of course, a storm rolled in and it was completely cloudy, could not see anything. Nothing went according to plan. My car battery even died. I was stranded. It was a whole thing. But I didn't let that slow me down because I knew somehow I was going to get a photo of the moon. So after taking a little break in my car, a little snooze, I drove to a different location where I thought, maybe the clouds are moving this direction, so I'll go the opposite direction. And lo and behold, it wasn't the shot that I wanted to get initially, but I think it turned out even better. So I think it's important to remember that if things don't go according to plan, that's okay. And sometimes it is even better because you might get a shot that is way, way more interesting and way more fascinating than you had pictured in your mind. One of my biggest tips for moon photography is honestly just to go out. Oftentimes when I'm out, I'm not necessarily looking for the moon. I do have an app on my Apple Watch where I can track the moon phase, so I'm always aware of what phase the moon is in, but I'm not necessarily always planning for a shot because I know that when I'm outside, I have a tendency just to look up because I love the moon, and a lot of my shots actually aren't necessarily planned. It's being in the right place at the right time because I go out frequently and I'm out in nature more often than most. So right now the moon phase is a little bit fuller than quarter moon, and that can be a great time to align it over certain objects because it's going down a little after sunrise and it's rising a little bit too late right now in the middle of the night. So I'm not shooting anything at around sunset. It's been more around sunrise for this trip specifically. But it is something to keep in mind when you are planning your trips, to take a look at a moon phase calendar, see when it's going to be full, when it's going to be a new moon, and you can sort of plan your trip around that. Being more prepared, making sure that you can get to where you want to be in time for said shot that you want to get is also a really important factor. I always try to keep an eye on the moon phase and where it's going to be, and on our way here I was on the very helpful app PhotoPills trying to see if I could find a fun moon alignment, and just so happens, first day here, the moon is going to align right in between the Grand Teton and the mountain next to it, and I am so excited to see this lineup. Hopefully it'll work out and be great. Such a powerful tool where you can literally line up exactly where the moon's going to be over a certain point. You can see what your focal length and your field of view will be. It's a really amazing tool for moon photography, and it's definitely taken my work to the next level, and so I highly recommend that app if you haven't yet. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but they can help walk you through exactly how to plan and align your moon shots. I am personally drawn to more environmental shots when I'm photographing the moon. I think it's really interesting and fascinating to see this celestial object that's so far away from us sort of interacting with its planet, with Earth, and the interesting features that are here that kind of feel like they're playing together. So I really love to align the moon over some mountains. It kind of makes it feel like it's sort of balancing on top of the mountain, and then it's going to set behind the mountain in a little bit, so I'm excited to see that as well. It's pretty bright right now. The moon was full a few days ago, and so now it's setting a little bit later in the morning, but it's actually kind of nice because that means the moon isn't so bright compared to the foreground. So I'm able to get this, hopefully this shot in a single exposure instead of having to stack, whereas if it was setting earlier in the morning or later at night, I would probably have to take two separate exposures, one for the foreground and one for the moon. If you are planning to go out and shoot the moon, maybe for the first time, another thing to keep in mind is that A, the moon moves pretty quickly, and B, Earth is also rotating pretty quickly. So a faster shutter speed will be great. Unless you are purposefully trying to slow it down, you can get really cool moon streaks as it's rising and setting, which can be a fun thing to play around with as well. But I'm usually using at least maybe 1/500th of a second or so when I'm photographing the moon, depending on light, of course. Maybe I'll go down to 1/200th of a second as well. It just sort of depends on the scenario and the lighting situation that I'm in. But that is definitely something to keep in mind, because the last thing you want to do is get home, be excited about your images, and then you look at them on the computer and you've got a little bit of motion blur, because that can be tough to counteract in post-processing. Okay, like I don't want to miss it. It's not quite there yet, but I just don't want to miss it. Because the moon is so far away, I'm stopping my aperture down to about f11, maybe f13, just so that I can get the mountains and the moon both in focus together. But it is fun to play around, focusing on just the moon at really wide aperture like f2.8, or the mountain, you get the blurred moon in the background. So I definitely encourage you to play around with different apertures when you're photographing the moon over landscapes. I'm shooting on the Sony a7R5 with the Sony 70-200mm f2.8 G Master Mark II. With the 61 megapixels, it gives me a lot of room to crop, so I don't need to worry about shooting really tight only at 400. I love being able to be wider at 70 as well to get more of the environment in it as well. Oh, that's so cool. When I'm photographing the moon, I often like to use either the Sony 100-400mm f4.5 to 5.6 G Master to get really tight in close on it, or even at 100, if I'm really far away from a subject, I can bring out that sort of telephoto compression, but also get some of the context of where the moon is. I also love to use the Sony 24-70mm f2.8 G Master. The Mark II is lighter and more compact, so I really love that lens as well. That's more for environmental, where the moon is maybe more of an accent piece and it's not necessarily the main character of the photo. I'm so stoked about this. It's not like necessarily the most ideal lighting, but it is really cool lineup. And it's one that I've never seen before. I love the juxtaposition of how light the moon looks in the sky right now in comparison to these really jagged and impressive mountains. It's this really nice dichotomy of these like really strong mountains and this really delicate sort of soft moon. It was a little bit later in the day than I would have liked. Sometimes you can't plan your trip around the exact dates that you want, but that's okay. Again, improvising, finding something that will work, and I'm really excited about that shot that I got, and I think I'll be able to edit it, bring out some of the color, bring out more contrast in the moon in post-processing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I get very stressed out, but I have to remind myself I'm out here for a reason. The moon brings me so much joy, and it's really fun to just experience those fleeting moments out in nature. My personal favorite phase of the moon, I think, is just after sunset when it's twilight and you've got this beautiful blue-purple gradient and a really delicate crescent moon. I think there's just something so tranquil about that, and that's one of the things that brings me back to balance. It's something that sort of grounds me a little bit, and you'll notice in a lot of my work that I use symmetry, and that's, I think, partly because I'm constantly trying to find balance in my life, and that comes through in my work. Over the years, the moon has become a symbol of our emotions, our dreams, our intuition. It's something that connects us to the past because it's always been there. It's something that also connects us to the future and allows us to look forward and look ahead to things. It's always been an object of contemplation and reflection for us. And through art, we're able to feel its transcendence. I'm really excited to continue shooting here this week in Grand Teton National Park, but let me know down in the comments, what time of day is your favorite to shoot the moon, what's your favorite phase, maybe what's your favorite shot that you've taken of the moon. And I'm really excited for the next week's episode with Nate. We're gonna go on a huge wildlife adventure, and you are not gonna wanna miss this. So tune in next week.